believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Brandes, also known as Ricky Brandes, and a great episode for you today. Today we have a dear friend of mine, Scott from the REBUNKED podcast, Scott Armstrong. His name might sound familiar because you guys probably know him from his previous project, the Truthzilla podcast, and now he's on to his new project, which is called the REBUNKED podcast, and I'll put links in the show description to all its work, or you can go to rebunked.news, and that will take you to his website where you can find all the channels that you can find the videos and all the places you can find the audio. Scott is a regular on the Union of the Unwanted, so you guys might be familiar with him, but if you're not, he shares his personal story, which I can't thank him enough to have the courage to discuss it with the honesty that he does. I think telling personal stories, talking about personal traumas or struggles growing up really helps with people who are dealing with the same thing, because we do learn from our mistakes and our struggles and our stumbles in our lives, but we can also learn from what other people have been through. Again, thanks so much, Scott, for being so honest, being so sincere, and being an open book. So please support his work and all his projects. Now to the business, right? This is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this conversation or any of the conversations I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. Obviously, financially, if you can, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. Share, review, tell people about the show, and that all helps a lot. Subscribe to us on any platforms that you're watching or listening to this podcast, and there's plenty of platforms to do that. I'm on Substack, Band.video, Odyssey, Rumble, and many more video platforms, and the audio is available just about everywhere. iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can find links to all these and much more on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. And on that website, you will also find all the ways of supporting the show. I have a Patreon page if you want to support me on Patreon. And if you do, thank you so much. And once a month, I try to get together with my Patreon supporters to do a Patreon podcast. So it's just a podcast I do with my Patreon supporters to show my appreciation. If you have PayPal, you can send a donation via PayPal. If you're into crypto, you can send Bitcoin. I have my Bitcoin QR code on the website. If you like the intro music on my website, you'll also find a link to my music. It's available on iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, many other places. You can also listen to this podcast or watch it on Rockfin, which is a video platform. So it's like YouTube, but you can actually support the content creators on there. You can tip a couple bucks for an episode that you enjoy. And just by watching and listening to content creators on Rockfin, you're supporting their work. And there's tons of free content. The majority of it is free. You can use it just like you use YouTube. Go on there, check it out. So many content creators that have been on my show and on the Union of Unwanted are on there. So please check out Rockfin. They have an app, so download the app or just use a web browser. So plenty of different ways of supporting the show. Last but not least, I am now working with Richard Grove from the University of Reason. He is also the host of Grand Theft World, which you can also find on Rockfin. Amazing show. But if you guys have been listening to my show for a while, you know Richard and I are friends, and we've been friends for a long time, and I'm a huge fan of his work. And his new project, the University of Reason, I think is a great way of helping my listeners. If you guys are looking to expand on a skill or a hobby or a desire, a passion, a talent that you have, check out the University of Reason. Click on the links below or go to therippleeffectpodcast.com. Go to support and you'll find the links to the University of Reason. So many of us, especially myself, before I started doing this podcast, we were looking to get more out of life. We were looking to do something more fulfilling, find purpose in life, And I think his course, his class, his community that he created can help out with that. So please check out the University of Reason. Please use the links in the show description or the links on my website. Also, last couple things I haven't mentioned in a while. I do have a Telegram chat. So if you're looking to connect with myself or other listeners of the show and you want to just share articles or talk to people in the community, please check out my Telegram chat. Also, by the way, when you're watching the Ripple Effect podcast, if you like the mugs that you see me drinking out of, if you like the t-shirts or hoodies you see me wearing from time to time, please check out the Ripple Effect podcast merch.com. Johnny Larson, who's a great artist, helped me out with a new design that we just released. It's kind of like a binary code type of Orwell 1984 type of design. I think if you guys check it out, you'll really like it. And I'm working on some new designs that should be released very soon. But please check out all the cool stuff we have on the website. You can go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on support, and you'll find the link to the merchandise store. Or if you want to go directly there, you can go to the rippleeffectpodcastmerch.com. Grab a hoodie, grab a tank top, grab a t-shirt, a hat, a mug, whatever it may be. It'll help with financial expenses like all these domain names, all these websites, all the bandwidth, all the storage, all the equipment. All this stuff costs money. Paying artists like Johnny Larson, who did an amazing job, and he's really inexpensive. He's one of the reasonably priced quality artists out there, which apparently is really hard to find. So check out Johnny Larson's link in the show description if you're looking for a quality, reasonably priced artist. And I think that's it. Enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. You got a new project, right? Which is a
new project, man. New project. Pretty excited about it. It's been going great, man. Like, I mean, obviously we could talk about TrueZilla and all that a little bit, but just really excited to be, just with this new project. It's all good things.
Yeah, well, one thing I've always loved about you specifically is the fact that you've always seemed very motivated. Like you always seem like you really cared about doing something and having an impact. And that's like the common thing that we all have. Like the people who I think succeed in regards to just having a show that people enjoy and like. And because one, you put in the work, it's almost, because I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, it's like you become obsessive compulsive about your like wanting to get the stuff out there, and then you're always looking for like the best guests, the best conversations, what's the most important conversations to share with the people, and you almost become obsessed with this whole project of doing something, and a little bit is probably selfish because it's rewarding, after having what you feel like is an important conversation and you put it out to the world, you're like, somebody's going to benefit from this. I benefited from having the conversation. Hopefully the guests benefited in sharing that journey with me and having that conversation with me. But I know listeners are probably going to enjoy it too and benefit from it. So you feel like you're doing something. And there's always, I mean, life's a journey, it's a journey about finding fulfillment. I mean, we're, to quote Joe Rogan, we're pleasure monkeys, and we're constantly looking for stuff that makes us happy, fulfilled, and when you find a passion project that can do that and you can tap into that, I mean, there's nothing better.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. It's just like this, just hunger and desire to like, okay, so we reach that plateau, what's next? And we reach that plateau, what's next? You know what I mean? In the interest of bringing the best information and the best guests and that sort of stuff, and then like what you were saying, just the impact, and I've seen it firsthand. I've got to meet so many of these folks. Like we did like a little freedom festival up here in Oregon last year, and like there was some like this one gal, Catherine, give her a big shout out here. I was up, like we were like hauling wood for the fire or something like that, and I was like driving a tractor and like yelling, and she walked up to me, she's like, "Are you Scott from TrueZilla?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I recognize your voice. I've never seen your videos, but I just recognize." I'm like, "Whoa, that's such a trip." So anyway, but they've been huge contributors and stuff too. But then also while I was at that, that was a different festival. But anyway, it's like this whole freedom community now. You know what I mean? That's kind of born out of this whole mess that we've been in the last couple of years. But another guy, Nate from the show Reality Czars, came up to me and said that because of our show, because of TrueZilla, he decided that they weren't going to vaccinate his kid. And I was like, what? That's insane. And Yeah, and I'm making plans to go up to Portland to actually visit the new kid too. So that's pretty cool stuff right there. I mean, you can't like that right there just made it all worth it. All worth it. Just that right there, you know.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we don't really know who we're touching. You know,
Yeah.
we don't know. I mean, sometimes I'll get a message from a listener who's been listening to the show for years. I mean, they'll reference some show like, oh, I started listening to you when you did your JFK show with Abraham Bolden or whoever, and it's like, wow, you've been listening to the show forever, and they'll send me a message, and I'll be like, this person, I've been connecting with this person, indirectly for years. Like they've been getting something out of the show. They've never told me,
Mhm.
but like I'm impacting people like them, over and over again without even knowing, because not everybody will reach out and tell you about it. So it's always nice when they do. It's nice to get that feedback, because every time you do, it's like you get like a little jolt of energy. You get a little extra jolt of motivation to do what you're doing. Because even though it is easy in some sense of like doing this because I enjoy it, and I've always been a people's person. If you lived in my neck of the woods, we'd probably be friends without a doubt, because I love connecting with people. It's like, oh, we got this in common. Oh, that's cool. Let's hang out. Whatever. And anytime I find somebody who's cool, I try to like bring them into the group and hang out and kind of make them a part of the clique, because I know that there's a lot of shitheads out there. So when you find somebody who's cool, who can fit in the group, regardless the background or whatever. I mean, if my group of friends, I got Polish friends, right off the boat, Polish friends. I got friends from Lebanon. I got friends from El Salvador. I got friends from all over the world, and it's like we all have a couple, like something in common. But the one thing we all really have in common is they're all sincere people. Like we're all like solid. You meet them and you're like, okay, maybe you're from a neck of the woods, you're from some part of the world that I'm not too familiar with, but I'm curious about your culture, and you seem like a really good person. And to me, like that's the first step. And a lot of times when I gather all these people together, one thing that is interesting is how curious people are with each other's cultures. And it's like so often like culture and nationalities or where you're from becomes a way of separating people. But a lot of times you get just good people together, they're actually quite curious about other people's cultures and fascinated. And you realize like they all have beautiful things about them. And but yeah, so it's our community is just, I love our community. I love it's almost like my personal life. Like there's so many cool people that I know would be in my circle if they lived nearby. And this to be able to, I'm way off track. I'm like, what the fuck did I start talking about?
No, it's great, man. This is great. I mean, this is what it's all about right here. I mean, the world is such a beautiful, fascinating place of just like all these different cultures and stuff. You know what I mean? And we can learn from each other. And in fact, like that's what we're seeing in the world, I think, is the top-down control to keep us as divided as possible and to keep us othering each other as much as possible, to the point where we can't bridge that divide based on whatever it is they're trying to divide us over. And that is their control mechanism. So the more that we can have like conversations with people that maybe think differently than us, and we're starting to see that, like I've had conversations with people that don't think the same as me, on the issues that are the most divisive these days. And it's starting like now there's just like little tendons are starting to connect just a little bit. Not quite, like there's still obviously some pushback, but I feel like the overall consciousness of humanity is like raising up. As the craziness is raising up, also I feel like it's almost permissible to have conversations. And it's like on their end, like the people that have been indoctrinated this whole time, like I think something clicked in the last few like month or so, couple months, where it's all of a sudden they have permission to start maybe questioning these things a little bit, and they're starting to see the veil being lifted, and all the harder the insanity gets pushed, the more they're like, wait a minute, something's not right here. So, and we're here, we're waiting, we're ready for them.
Well, that's an important point, because we have to keep waking people up and we have to keep fighting. I mean, I've been doing shows on the medical industry and health and nutrition for a long time, and it's always been an issue, and it always seemed like a concerning issue. Like this is a huge topic. This is a huge issue. More people should be concerned about it. And not until like 2020 did like the whole world become just concerned about like, okay, how scientific is the science that they're telling us is scientific? These experts, how many of them actually have other motives on why they push certain things and suppress other things, and you're starting to see people open up to that. But it's always concerning when people get busy again and people get some aspect of their lives back, because that's kind of what happened before. Is like people became. It's almost like if you go through a bad breakup, right? Like a unoccupied mind's your worst enemy, because you just keep thinking about the trauma. You keep thinking about what happened or what went wrong. But if you stay busy, you can kind of get over the trauma. And like the trauma of 2020, I feel like because people are getting busy again, like they're forgetting everything that happened. I remember driving around. I was just thinking about this recently, because the weather in New England's like finally getting a little nicer, and it was like a nice day out, and I'm driving from, I don't know, from the gym or to basketball or something. I was driving around, and I remember seeing kids at the park playing basketball, and I remember seeing like just cars on the road, and it's been like this for a while, but like it just hit me. Like I had like this flashback of like 2020 driving by that same park, driving down those same roads, and there was nobody anywhere. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, when the fuck are things going to look normal again? Like I remember just thinking, like, I don't know when I'm not going to see masks. I don't know when I'm going to see parks filled again. Like it was such a surreal time to live through. And it's like a lot of people just are ready to move on from it. And I get it, because it is one of those things where when you go through some type of trauma, when you go through like a really difficult part of your life, it's easier to kind of forget about it and move on. And then like keep revisiting that. But the reason why we have to keep revisiting it to an extent is we have to keep, well, maybe not revisiting, but keep reminding ourselves that it can happen again if we don't hold people accountable. It can happen again if we don't have a little bit of maybe anger towards what happened, to the point where it's like, okay, if this shit happens again, I'm not going to fall for it. I'm not going to trust them. They're guilty until proven innocent. I'm not, they're liars until proven that they're telling the truth. And I have zero trust in the media. I have zero trust in what the establishment calls experts. And I hope that people think like that, because it is a little concerning when people just think like because they can go out to eat again, or because they don't have to wear masks again, that like whoever ruined their lives for a couple of years are gone and they're not doing any more harm to the world. And it's like, I don't know, the media's still lying to you. There's still agendas being pushed. There's still infrastructure for, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, whatever term you want to use. And we're taking baby steps. It might not be as obvious, because you can occupy your time and yourself with these other things now, but we have to stay alert. And alternative media has been around forever, but a lot of people didn't even know it existed, or thought the things we were complaining about had no reflection on reality or had no effect on their lives until it did. And that's why I always say my hat goes off to people, like yourself. You were on the front lines. You're vocal, you're putting out important shows, you're having important conversations, you didn't stray away from confrontation or at least controversial topics. And Ryan from Last American Vagabond, James Corbett, Del Bigtree, Jason Burmis, all the doctors that just did amazing work. I mean, it'd be really, really easy to be like, let me just hide in a bunker and wait till this all blows over. And you can just kind of be like, okay, somebody else will do the fighting for me. Somebody else will do the truth seeking and the corruption exposing for me. But we didn't do that. Like, we were like, no, we're gonna be vocal. We're gonna be proactive. And it doesn't. I know it's hard to believe that shows, as small as mine or yours, like had an impact. But I'm telling you, we had an impact, because the reason why, and I keep saying this, the reason why Robert Malone and Dr. Peter McCullough end up being on Rogan's podcast was because, and the reason why Rogan knew their names was because they were doing shows like yours and shows like mine, or even the shows that they weren't on. Their work was being referenced over and over and over again. We were circulating their names, that we were making their names and their work household names, to the point where you couldn't ignore it anymore. And eventually they ended up being on the biggest podcast in the world. So we all contributed to that. And that's why I hope people listening, they support alternative media. They support these platforms that give us a spot to have these conversations, because I mean the YouTube censorship and all that stuff obviously was a huge hit. It made it much harder to get information out there, because the average person who would typically go to YouTube to look for information couldn't find any alternative perspectives. But it also opened the door to these other platforms. And like I always say, when one door closes, another one opens. And I think similar to your new your new show, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think in the long run it might be beneficial, because now we're on platforms where we don't have to self-censor at all. Because even before, you knew with YouTube you had to play that stupid game. I think I heard you on like a podcast. I forget who you're interviewing, where you're like, I'm not on YouTube yet. I'm not playing that game. And I'm like,
oh yeah. Well, I put up 2 episodes, and then they took. So Ryan with Last American Vagabond, that was my first episode of the new show. That one's still there, ironically. And Ryan's like one of the most censored people out there. And then I uploaded episode 2 with Sam Tripoli, and all we were talking about was like recovery. Really, they took that one down. So I was like, okay, YouTube, I'm not even playing games. So my goal is to I'm going to upload with the thumbnail and the episode description, and then just do a quick little thing and say, hey guys, get over to the other platforms to watch the show or listen to the show. But I haven't quite got there yet. It's just too busy. But yeah, man, the censorship, man. I'm grateful that we have these platforms like Rockfin. Big shouts out to Rockfin, man. Behind the scenes, they're so helpful, and just yep, come on in, here you go. Pretty cool.
And I think their perspective changed slightly too, because when they first contacted me and they were trying to get some people from the alternative media community, I think they found a hole in the market. And Martin's really intelligent. I mean, the way his brain works, you could tell this is the type of guy that whatever business he chase or gets involved in, he'll do well, because he has such a business savvy approach to things, and he's really intelligent and looking at things from outside the box. But I'm I don't know if their motives were to get truth out, so I was always a little skeptical about okay, is this just a money grab, but then when the shit hits the fan, the fact that they didn't censor anybody, they gave people like Jason Burmis and other people who were kind of making a killing on video platforms like YouTube, and then they obviously were concerned about losing their salary, and then they gave them a alternative at Rockfin, and they backed them up, they helped them, they helped all these other content creators, they never censored anybody. And then I even started seeing Rockfin tweet, or people who work at Rockfin retweet things that were we would retweet. It would be things about that was skeptical of the experts or what was going on. I think they're coming along. I think they weren't really. I think many of them, even with Martin, he was really into starting his business and doing all this stuff, a tech guy and crypto, but he didn't really dive deep into the alternative media world. And I think that taking on all these perspectives and kind of observing some of our work kind of opened his mind to it. And I think Rockfin has become even more important than they even know. In regards to just getting that information out there at such a crucial time, because people were looking for a place to find this information, and to have a spot where you could say, hey, it's on Rockfin, and I never have to worry about it being deleted, sending them the link and a link not working or whatever. And then also putting a face to the people, it's having knowing the people behind the scenes and knowing the people who work there, and the fact that you can talk to them and you can have to me that was just awesome. It gave me a sense of security that okay, I feel safe here. If I put my content here, if I'm telling people to go over to Rockfin, I now feel comfortable supporting the platform. And at first I wasn't like that, because I'm wait, they came from it was called Flow Sports. Yeah, he came from Flow Sports. That was his first venture, business venture with his brother, I believe, and then they separated, and then he started his own business, and it seemed like a lot of wrestling and sports oriented stuff, and then it just seemed like he they were smart, because they realized okay, well, if there's all these people being censored on YouTube, where are they going? Why not bring them over because they're looking for a home. And a lot of these people have huge platforms on YouTube or huge followings. So so at first, like I said, I was a little skeptical, but then I think they came around, during 2020, it couldn't be a better time to have that option of a Rockfin and Jeremy at Odyssey, who truly believes in, libertarian perspectives and free speech and all that stuff. And I don't know much about the BitChute guys or some of the other platforms, but Float, for example, another one,
Totally.
awesome guy, awesome company, awesome people working there. They truly believe in free speech. So it's how many of these platforms would be household names? I mean, the No Agenda show is bringing up Rumble and BitChute and stuff like that. Rogan's brought up Rumble a few times.
I've been censored on Rumble. I got a video taken down off Rumble.
Really?
Yeah, man. Like we did back in like January 2021, we made a little video about like the 10 stages of genocide, right? Like a little mini documentary about our thoughts that, and at the time, like this was like, before even Biden got into office, it was after the election. And so we were thinking, we were kind of extrapolating that the 10 stages of genocide were going to mean they're going to round up all the Trump supporters. This is even before like anti-vaxxer became like the huge thing that it became, you know what I mean? And we're, our theory was that they were going to round us all up in boxcars and throw us in a freaking whatever, you know what I mean? But so it's kind of funny going back and watching it now. But yeah, Rumble took it down. They said that there was too much violence in it, right? And so, we were showing some footage of like Rwanda, but it wasn't like any sort of like extreme violence. But yeah, we've had a video taken down off Rumble. I thought that was really crazy. And and the funny thing is that video is still to this day on YouTube. And I emailed the guy or whoever it was. I shouldn't assume gender, right? The person at Rumble, and I said, hey, you realize this video that you just censored is still on YouTube, right? You really want to be that? You really want to be like that? And they're like, we're so sorry. It goes against our policy. I'm like, all right, dude. Well, I'm just going to go and tell everybody that you guys censor me. Now, I'm on Rumble. And granted, I don't really advertise it. And BitChute just did this thing where you have to like pay now to upload videos higher than 2 gigabytes. So now I have to like go back and reformat the video to upload to BitChute. And so I'm a little behind there. But anyway, it's all good.
I know that. I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, Matt takes care of a lot of that stuff. So he helps out a lot. But yeah, well, that's concerning if they are censoring. I mean, obviously, it's weird that they're not censoring any of the like anything that's anti-vaccine, but yet they're censoring imagery like that, which is kind of weird.
I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. And I've heard
public company.
I heard him interviewed on some show, and it was just kind of like, I was like, like, are we just setting up the same paradigm as YouTube? It's just like they're just gonna, and that's what I'm hearing too with like platforms like Getter, or I heard rumors about like Truth Social. Like they're just censoring the opposite side now. Now they're just censoring like liberals or something. Like I don't know, dude.
I'm a big believer just going on every platform. Like, what? I'm just gonna go on every platform, and that way, if one kicks me off, I don't care. I'm still on, I'm on the other one. So that way, to me, it's like to be on a platform. It doesn't necessarily mean you're supporting the platform or what they believe in. If they believe in something, it's more just like, okay, it's a tool that I can use to get these conversations out there and this information out there, and maybe expose my show to some new audience, and that's it. I'm on band.video. Is your new show on band.video yet?
No. So like that's the thing is like I don't want to just like email Rob and be like just feel like I just deserve a channel on band.video. You know what I mean? It's like that doesn't work like that. So I figured like I want to build up this body of work. There's all these, I want to do all these cool things. Like I've got little mini documentaries I want to make. I want to do some man on the street stuff and kind of build something worthy of that platform. You know what I mean? I'm not like just going to be like, feel like I'm entitled to it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you were a big part of Truthzilla. I think a lot of the backbone behind, I'm assuming here, but I could just tell by, one, you're a musician, so we have that in common. And usually musicians are very artistic. They love being creative, and so I have I'm taking a guess here, but I'm assuming you were a big part of the creative part of that team.
The creativity part, we did share a lot of that. Like that was, and in fact, that was the thing, is that it was a very democratic thing. Like it was either we're all in or we're all out. You know what I mean? And it was like, the artistic side of it, we collaborated, and that was very much, but as far as like the technical stuff, I did take on a lot of that burden, I think primarily because others were, they've got kids and family, and I'm just like, well, I don't have any of that. So I kind of took it on, you know what I mean? But
have you told the story on what happened yet?
Yeah, I talked about it on the false reality check episode I did a little bit ago, but just to mention it for because I know there's a lot of overlap between your audience and Truthzilla and all that. So just to kind of just put it out there, like what I've been saying is just really, you know, the band broke up, man. You know what I mean? We've all had like our favorite band, and then you hear like, oh, they're breaking up. That's crazy. You know what I mean? Basically reached a point where it was like we couldn't move forward because we had different visions about what was to come next, and it was either we just and that was pretty much the dissolution of it, the dissolving of it, right? And but I couldn't just sit back and keep my mouth shut and just fade off into the sunset. Like, man, I had to do something. So I said, I'd just launch this new show. I'm like, you know, it sucks and it's sad, and it's like, in fact, you know, I don't want to glance over that piece of it. You know, you were talking about like going through a bad breakup, man. Like that felt like any breakup I've ever had was like nothing compared to this, man. I was like in a dark place for a couple of weeks. I was like, oh my God. It was like, you know, when you like literally like attached every, like that was like who I was, you know what I mean? Like I had attached my identity so much to that. Like I was that person. Like I couldn't envision, like I built this thing up to where it's like, now I don't envision who I am without that. And that was like, it's a very earth shattering place to be, you know? And just like walking away from a platform on Band.video. Like that's one of those things that's like people say I achieved my dreams. Well, that's something that I never even thought to even dream of. It's like you just surpassed whatever your dreams were. Like being on that platform, dude, like that's insane. You know what I mean? Like that's like, man. And so like having to just put it all aside and knowing that it's for the best, you know, because like where we were at, it just wasn't sustainable necessarily. And the thing is like, I have so much respect and appreciation for Ed and Megan and what we were able to accomplish. And the body of work itself stands, and I'm super proud of every single damn thing that we did. But, you know, unfortunately we just weren't able to get past where we were at. And it was just inevitable, really. And my understanding is that they're going to keep the show going, and I hope they do. If they're listening to this, I really hope you guys do. You know, just for the sake of it. But pretty much, I left them with the whole franchise and just said, all right, I'm going to go off and do my own thing then. So.
Well, the pros and cons of that is because I had a co-host when I started the show,
Yep.
and being in a band, also growing up and being in music and being around other bands, it's hard to do things on your own, but at least your destiny is in your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like if you fail or you succeed, it's all because of the work you do or don't put in. And you don't have to worry about anybody else's vision. You don't have to worry about anybody else's input. And not to say like there is, you know, a wisdom in crowds, right? Like if you get a group of people and we brainstorm something, there's a potential that we might come up with a better idea together, and we'll bounce ideas off each other. But it's not sustainable in some cases, because when you're doing a podcast, especially when you're bringing on guests, and I'm sure you probably went through this with Truthzilla, it was hard to book people around everybody's schedule,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it was like when I had my co-host, it was like his schedule was different than my schedule. Then I had guests that I'm trying to get on, and then so it's like the guests had to find a time that worked for me and my co-host, and it did become hard. And it's like, like, wow, man, I could just pop these out way quicker and become less of a headache. And then, you know, my co-host Dave, he's still one of my best friends. I love the guy to death. Awesome. But he used to drive me crazy because sometimes I would work my ass off to get a day and time that worked for all of us, and then the last second he couldn't make it, and I'm like I could have fucking had this person on the show last month, but I'm like I postponed it to find a perfect day and time that worked for all of us, and then at the last second you don't end up making it, and then it just felt like he had one foot in, one foot out, like he wasn't as committed as maybe I was, and then, you know, it just got to a point where I'm just like, you know what, and it wasn't even me. I actually wanted him to continue joining the show, and I was willing to work with him. But once he decided, he's like, listen, it's like, who wants to listen to me talk when you're having all these great guests on? And I'm like, yeah, but you still have incredible perspective, and our shows, our solo shows, people enjoy. I'm like, you don't have to have a huge resume to have huge ideas and interesting ideas. So but when he left, it was the same thing, where it's like at first I had a little bit of anxiety because I'm like, I'm not used to doing this by myself, and my co-host Dave, he's like one of the smartest people in, one of my smartest people I know. And I know if I have somebody really intelligent on and I struggle, he can hold a conversation for me. Did you hear that hiss? Is it coming on your side?
Yeah, I just heard something. It's gone now. Weird. Oh, now I don't hear anything from you.
It's this microphone. Okay. Oh, it went away. Jesus. Every once in a while, I have to figure out what the hell it is that's causing that. But he's one of the smartest people I know. So because of that, like I felt comfortable where if I maybe struggled to come up with a really creative question for a guest, he might bring something really interesting to the conversation. So I remember being like, I forget who was my first guest solo, but I remember being like, just having anxiety, just feeling like, oh my God, can I do this? I'm like, Dave went to college. He has, he took philosophy. He has this amazing career. He's older than me. He has all this wisdom. I'm like, what am I going to bring to the table? And so it was a little scary. But then after a while, you're like, okay, maybe it was a good thing, because as a artist and people who like to do creative things like us, sometimes it's nice to have the freedom of just taking things where you want to take them without any resistance. And it's like, you know what? I think this is a good idea. If it fails, it's on me. But at least I can give it a try, and at least I can take this idea and really give it the attention and nurturing and really see where it can go on my own. And if it doesn't work, then you know what? It's on me. That's the thing about building anything, is like you're going to have tons of failures, tons of things that don't work, and then eventually you'll find that thing that does work. And that's kind of just the whole thing. I mean, I know you talked about Richard Gage. You talked to him recently. I also talked recently. I was kind of busting his balls about like, how different is it being the one who's doing the interview compared to the one usually being asked the questions. And he was honest. He says he's struggling and it's hard, and he's used to kind of being asked the question, and to be able to hold a conversation with somebody. It seems like something anybody could do, but it's not always the case, especially when you're having a lot of guests on that have different personalities, a lot of guests on that maybe some of them you can just ask one question and they can rant for an hour, kind of like myself. But
yeah, that's why I didn't prepare for this interview at all. I'm just gonna go. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
some guests like need a little bit of pushing, right? You need to like kind of you ask them. There's been times, I don't know if this has happened with you, where you'll talk to somebody and you feel like you ask the question that will take you to a really interesting spot, and then they'll give you a really short answer.
Yep. Oh yeah, all the time.
I'm like, wait, I wasn't prepared for to ask another question. I was hoping this question was gonna like, catapult us to the next, the next part of this conversation, and really get us deep into something. So there's times where I'm just like, wait, that was it? That was your answer? I'm like, no, I wasn't ready. It's so funny. It's not. It seems like you just hit record, you should just act normal, right? You should just act the way you act with your buddies. And it's like, no, man. Once you know you're being recorded, it's like it sits there in your subconscious, and it has an effect on how casual you are or whatever. That's why I love shows like these, like people like yourself who I've interacted a lot with throughout the years, and I'm comfortable talking to. I feel like it's really easy to get in that comfort zone. But then certain people, it takes a little bit of time. It's like, okay, maybe only 30 minutes in do I feel like it's a casual conversation. Sometimes like the first 30 minutes, maybe the first 45 minutes feels like a interview, and then you get to that point where it feels like a conversation, and totally. That's like the sweet spot. That's where I constantly want to like dwell and hang out in, because to me that's where like you just don't know where it's going, and what's going to happen. So it's awesome. I heard also on one of your podcasts that you're moving, right? You're moving East Coast.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm moving eastward. So yeah, moving to Tennessee, man. Getting out of this state, man. Done. It's the whole thing, man. I'm super excited. So right now I'm working. So I've been grateful for this job. That kind of, after I had the whole falling out with the counseling thing because of the vax mandate. This company I used to work for, it's a local countertop fabrication shop. They scooped me back up, and like right now, working like 6 days a week, like 10 hours a day, just doing like massive production. So I'm just stacking overtime, and so it's very, very like, synchronistic that this is all coming together. I've already put my notice in. So April 7th is my last day. And then I'm living with this guy right now. He's kind of like this inventor type, kind of like eccentric inventor type. And he's got all these different projects, and we're developing this off-grid heating system using rocket stove technology, so then I'm going to spend 2 weeks with him, and we're going to make a little documentary. We're going to do some illustrations for a book and put that out to the world. So more will be revealed with that. And then I'm hitting the road. And the plan is so April 22nd, somewhere around there, I just got a new truck too. Got a new truck for the trip. So I'm just going to basically put everything I own into it and then head out. I may stop down in Vegas. I guess Steve was from Slow News Day. They've got a new studio there. I'm going to like pop in, say hey to them. That's kind of part of the plan. And then go down to Float Fest. So I'm going to Float Fest to hang with the big boys down in Texas, which is the last weekend of April and then into May. And then, yeah, I'm super excited about that. And then pretty much just going sight unseen to Tennessee. And I mean, looking at all the different free states, obviously I was looking at like Florida, Texas, even Oklahoma. And really one of the bigger factors for me was the fact that so I'm a certified drug and alcohol counselor. That's something that I have a lot of passion for doing. And, that career is just not available to me here in Oregon anymore. You know what I mean? From my understanding is even now they're still requiring the vaccine. And so I'm just like, you know what, whatever. Like I was let go over it. And then I've applied at other agencies throughout the state. And it always gets to that. I mean, I basically, for lack of like just all but getting a job offer, and then they ask about the vaccine, and then it's like, no, not doing it. And then I never hear back from them. So all these other free states, like Florida, Texas, even Oklahoma, I believe, like they all require like a bachelor's degree. I think Florida, you have to have an associate's degree. And I don't. I just have like here in Oregon, you just need this certification, which is like, here you have to do all these classes and then like 2,000 or 1,000 hours on the job, whatever, you know what I mean? And so, but Tennessee doesn't. They don't require a degree. So I could basically take what I have, I think, and pretty much just transfer right over. And I could pretty much go back to work doing that if I wanted to. But also kind of just leaving doors and options open because, I'll have a little bit of savings. I won't have to jump right back into work. Might just do this. See if I could get this, leverage this into something to at least sustain me a little bit. I don't know. But a big part of the move also is just I really want to get involved with more just like agrarian lifestyle. Like I've got plugged into the Freedom Cell group out in like southeastern Tennessee, which is kind of where I'm thinking I'm going to head and see if I can land there and try to jump off there. But yeah, just really trying to like find a way to disconnect from the system and start growing food and just learn all that stuff. That's a big part of the goal. And I tried to build something like that out here in Oregon. We've got really involved with Freedom Cells. We got really involved with putting together events, meetups, all this stuff. And I poured myself into that too. And we were able to do some big things, but ultimately, I don't know. I feel like maybe getting plugged into a place where they are already like full steam ahead going. And it sounds like in Tennessee, this particular group, they're already doing the deal for reals. And so I just want to get involved with that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, it's change isn't always bad. It's scary, but it's sometimes good. It's nice to take a new journey, turn the page, move up, do something else, and who knows what doors are going to open. And I mean, you kill it anyways. I mean, your website. I remember checking out your website. I'm like, dude, this dude. I've been doing my podcast forever. I like feel like I just did a website recently. I mean, your website's awesome. You have a great website, easy to find everything. So it's super user friendly. I mean, I love your intro, your music, your intro, the way it looks like it's drawing the artwork. And all that.
Well, I got to shout out him. So it's at Bags Draws on Instagram. He does a lot of like pro bono artwork for like Abs in a Six Pack, which is a fantastic show. He does like OBDM. And I just love his style. So I reached out to him and commissioned. I'm like, hey, this is my idea. I just want to like have like all the conspiracies like in a pile of rubble, like the Twin Towers collapse. You know what I mean? And he just busted it out and then sent me that drawing. I'm like, oh, I'm using that as the intro. That's fantastic. But yeah, outsourcing a lot of this stuff, like not feeling like I have to take it all on. Like I did build the website, but I think and then the music is Portland hip hop artist called Rhyme Wave. So everybody go check him out because he's got some of the most awake red pilled hip hop out there. He's fantastic. Portland based. And they're working on a project, and he said they're kind of like taking a step back. So I don't know if he wants me to talk too much about it, but they're basically building a network of venues like around the world that don't require masks, don't require vaccine, like basically just liberty-minded, freedom-oriented venues for, whatever, hosting events or, performances, stuff like that. So Rhyme Wave hip hop on Instagram. So, but yeah, that's one of the things that I've found to be part of the success is like, I like to delegate and outsource. And I'm actually got plugged in with a local t-shirt design shop too. So instead of using the big shops, I want to try and go local with that too. So I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, man, thank you. It's cool.
Yeah, well, you always seem to be pretty good with this stuff. I mean, the look of Truthzilla was, I think, a big part of it. Like, it looked cool. It always, it sounded cool. It looked cool. It had a cool logo. It had a nice name to it. I think Rebunked's a pretty cool name too. It's really creative. I'm surprised that it actually hasn't been used before.
I know.
You couldn't
There's
find
nothing. There's no shows. There's no nothing. When you type in Rebunked, like, there's nothing really. Like, and that was one of the things about Truthzilla too, is that when you go to Google and you type in Truthzilla, it's all us. Bam, everywhere. There's no other things out there that have that name. And so having a unique name allows you to kind of dominate search results, which is a huge thing. And then Rebunked, surprisingly, there's no other shows. There's no other nothing. And so type in Rebunked is pretty much the show pops right up. Let me see. See if it's still like that.
Yeah, I fucked up because I named my show The Ripple Effect, which was like everything but well, this is what happened. Initially, it was hard to find my show, and then the show got big enough where it dominated the Google search.
Yep.
And once I got banned off YouTube, and I don't know if anybody else, any other content creators went through the same thing, but it was so obvious that once I got banned off YouTube, that all of a sudden, when you put in the Ripple Effect podcast, that everything was suppressed. Like my social media accounts, everything related to me was suppressed, and it wouldn't come up. And I'm like, well, I don't get it. Like, my YouTube channel is gone, so I get that not coming up, but why is the show not coming up at all, like on iTunes or whatever? And so it's kind of like you had to start all over once I got banned off YouTube. But then when I heard Dr. Robert Epstein on the Rogan podcast. And him, which was a phenomenal podcast. I keep recommending it because it truly was one of the better shows.
I'm scared to listen to that one. I've heard you talk about it. I've heard others talk about it too. I'm like, I'm kind of nervous. But I know it's just horrible. But
he's like a black belt in the subject, and he just takes it to a whole nother level. And it's just like, when you realize how deep and I mean, it's one of the, like, Rogan had a similar podcast that he had with like Macola and with Dr. Robert Malone, when it seemed like Rogan was like, it was all like all the dots were connected in his head, and he realized how serious how serious this all is. And like at the end of the Robert Malone podcast, he's just like, thank you, Dr. Malone. And he's like very kind of short. He didn't do a lot of talking. He did a lot of listening, and he was kind of quiet. It seemed like he was like trying to grasp the seriousness of it all. And it was similar kind of show with Dr. Robert Epstein, where it's just like, you're listening to this and you're just like, dude, this is even more serious than I thought it was. And so just the extent that they have control over everything online and the internet. So it's pretty scary. But yeah, I mean, I have the same issue. That's why word of mouth helps. I mean, I don't even know, and that's why I try to go on all the platforms, because it's like, I don't even know how to reach people. I tell people to go check out my show, and they'll say, oh, I Googled it and I couldn't find it. I'm like, how the fuck is that possible? I have 300 and whatever, 90 something shows. I'm on a bunch of different platforms. I've been around for a while. How is it not coming up? You're talking about like the most advanced algorithms, where when I spell something wrong, it still gives me the thing I'm looking for, and yet you can put in the exact title of the show and it won't come up immediately. Like, that's why I started the Clips channel, the very neglected Clips channel, because I'm like, okay, well, at least I have a presence on YouTube, and maybe it'll have an effect on the searches. So if you search, they're not going to suppress something that's not banned off YouTube, that's on YouTube. Maybe some of the clips will come up, and then that'll be hopefully the first step in being exposed to the show. Unfortunately, finding clips and making them take as long as making a full podcast. So it's like,
Hey, I just did an episode with Randy from Soundwave Promotions. I'm sure you've heard of him. He can probably help you out.
yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah,
Like
he's great.
I listened to a huge portion of that show because
Okay.
much like yourself, I knew of him. I've talked to him. I remember
Yeah.
when he hit me up years ago, and he talked about it was like 2019, maybe no, it
Yeah.
wasn't. No, it was during the 2020 era. Was it? I don't know. It was somewhere around then where
I think
where
that's when he got started, was like the whole 2020 thing.
yeah, he was talking about doing clips and all this stuff. I remember he was even discouraged a little bit.
Yeah.
We had a conversation via DMs and on Twitter, and he was like a little discouraged because he's like, I'm trying to make this a career, and he's like, he felt like he wasn't having any luck with like taking those steps, and like I told him, like, dude, just keep doing it. I'm like, listen, I've been doing this show for freaking what I feel like forever, and it's obviously not. So it's only since 2013, but it feels like
Still, you're an OG, man. 100%.
yeah,
100%.
kind of, yeah, and I'm like, I'm not making anywhere close to any money that you could consider living off. So I'm like, just be patient, keep doing what you're doing. Don't let those type of things kind of get in the way of your passion and your what you're trying to do, and things will fall into place. I mean, I keep saying that, and because maybe a part of it's like I'm trying to convince myself things will eventually fall into place, like but to me it's like that struggling musician who's playing at bars on weekends or whatever. It's like, okay, maybe you'll never go platinum. Not that that means anything, but but you're doing something you love, and the success or the feeling of success is coming from touching some people and knowing you're touching some people, and also feeling like you're contributing to some positive change in the world.
Yeah.
And so everything else is just like, okay, that would be great if I could do this full time. But if I can't, then I don't see the reason why I always hesitate to say this, because I'm like, I wonder if one day I'm going to regret saying this. Like one day I'll just be like, listen, money's super tight. I have to start putting my priorities in order, where it's like, let me focus on things that actually put food on the table for my family and all this stuff. And I can't keep half-assing those things. Not to half-ass those things, but it becomes very hard to juggle, as you know, like it's with a full-time job, and then you're also trying to do a podcast. It's really hard to fucking juggle. And even when you can juggle it, they get in each other's way, because sometimes I will show up to a podcast at the last second, like rushing around because, I had this stuff going on with the kids. The wife had to go to work. So I had the kids, and I had to drop off the kids at my parents' house real quick because my wife's at work. And then, so I'm rushing here, and I'm like, oh my God, I hope everything starts up, because I only have enough time to start everything up and hit record. Yep. And then all of a sudden you're trying to have a casual conversation, even though your heart rate's going crazy and your mind's all over the place, and you're thinking about like shit that you forgot to do before you left work and all this. It's like, it's just really, really hard. That's, Ryan says it, and it's I know he said it to you guys that on Truthzilla, I believe, and he has said it to me too, where he's like, I don't know how anybody has a full-time job and can do this, because it's so, and it's so true. Like it's really hard to kind of balance everything out and not be distracted by all these other things. Like it's just it's hard, but it's I don't know. I mean, obviously none of us are doing it for the money, because there's not a whole lot of money in doing this. That's why it's funny when people are like, oh, anti-vaxxers, all they're trying to do is make money. And, I'm like, there's no financial incentive in being banned everywhere, or being, losing the mainstream media's respect because you're just now pigeonholed as a anti-vaxxer. So it's like, you don't do this because of money. But you know what? Honestly, I don't think you do anything because of money. If you really love it, you do it because you love it, and then the money comes afterwards. Musicians, right? All the best albums, all the best musicians of all time. Like I have albums every once in a while. I'll just remember a album that was like so fucking influential in my life and like had a huge impact on me, that I'm like, probably nobody listened to that album. It wasn't, it like sold barely anything. Those guys who created this beautiful piece of music, they probably are working full-time jobs thinking like, what impact did I have? And yet, like they influence people like myself or other people who are doing other arts and other creative things, and they influence their way of thinking, and so they did create a ripple, and they it's so many bands. I mean, just small bands. I remember this band called R Squared. I remember this band called FBI from Canada. That was called FBI stood for Fueled by Ignorance, and like all these like just like really small bands that I'm just like, they came out with like a couple of self-recorded albums. And I have Stain's album that they recorded in my hometown in Ludlow, and Stain, Aaron Lewis Stain, and their story is pretty insane. I don't know if you know their story, but
No.
they have a pretty interesting story. So they were kind of popular locally, like the bar scene, because they were playing a lot of cover stuff. They were playing like Tool, their big Tool, Alice in Chains, like stuff like that, and then they ended up getting a gig, like their manager got them a gig for opening up for Limp Bizkit, right? And I forget where, it was somewhere kind of local in Massachusetts. And their self-titled album, no, it wasn't self-titled, it was called Tormented. I believe it was called Tormented. The self-recorded album, Tormented, had on the front of it, they had a Bible with like a knife in it and blood all over the place, and had a bunch of other like imagery that was kind of controversial or would like, shock rock type thing. And so Fred Durst, right before Stain was about to go on stage, is like, he sees his album, and he's kind of a religious guy. So he's like, who the fuck are these guys? He's like, no, they're not playing. Like, I don't want them playing. I don't want these guys opening up for me. But by the time he could say that, they already started playing. They're like, well, we can't stop them now. And I believe they're even going to cut it short, but he enjoyed like the first song, whatever they played, and maybe it was Mud Shovel, who knows. That was a song that came from that first self-recorded album that eventually ended up being on their first big label album. But he ended up loving them and getting them signed to Interscope, and it was just like, it was just luck of the draw, being at the right place at the right time. And those guys became, at one time, Stain was one of the biggest rock bands in the U.S., tons of chart-topping albums. And I remember seeing these guys locally. I remember working at the cinemas. My one of my first jobs, I would work at the cinemas on weekends, work construction during the weekend, and work at cinemas on weekend. And I would see Mike Mushak there, the guitarist. And the cool thing about Mike is that nobody recognized Mike, because nobody has like a face that you really remember except Aaron Lewis. Aaron Lewis had that look, everybody. But Mike is like one of the biggest bands in the U.S., and yet can go to the movies in Springfield, and nobody fucking recognized him. I remember working there. I'm like poking people. I'm like, yo, that's the guitarist of Stain. They're like, shut the fuck up. I'm like, yeah, that's guitarist. Wow. And it was just cool. And my co-host Dave actually went to high school with Mike, and Mike Mushak, the guitarist of Stain. And but like, think about it. Like, these dudes were just playing in a little, in a basement. I even know the street was on Fuller Street in Ludlow, recorded the album there, and then next thing you know, ended up being one of the biggest bands in the U.S. So you just never know who you're impacting or where it can go. I always use the example of Nikola Tesla, right? One of the greatest inventors ever. He wasn't motivated by financial motivations. He was motivated by, he really cared about having an impact on the world and humanity and his work. So I think that's always the best motivation. That's where kind of like myself and like libertarians will kind of we'll cross paths on a lot of topics, but then on that one we'll kind of separate a little bit, because I'm like, from an artist perspective, I'm like, I don't think capitalism, it gets us the best products all the time or gets us the best stuff all the time, because I think a lot of the best stuff comes from people who don't really give a shit about capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. And man, you're so right about that. Like, I think just the importance, and people recognize it too. Like, if you're just in it for the money, like people know, and it's like, it's unattractive. You know what I mean? Like, I even thought, like, after Truezilla, I was like, God, what am I going to do now? And I was like thinking about just like, well, I could do it. Like, my thought was like, I'll just do a show about recovery, just about recovery, nothing controversial, just about recovery. And maybe, I could support myself doing a mainstream quote unquote podcast. And I'm like, no, who are you kidding here? Come on now. Come on. Like, you got to get right back in the ring. Like, let's do this, man. So yeah, it's
have you had a show about that recovery story?
What's that?
Have you had have you done a show specifically on your own personal story of that?
No, not, maybe I've alluded to it. I'm trying to think. Actually, you know what I did? I went on with Cheney. I did Project Cheney with her, and I kind of spilled the beans about it. But
That would be
yeah,
the show because she loves those personal stories, and I love those personal stories because I
yeah,
think people gain a lot from it. For people listening who might not be familiar
yeah.
with some of your, but how much of it do you do? I mean, I don't want to put you in an
Dude,
uncomfortable
I'm a
spot.
full open book about it. I do not even care. Yeah, I think it's worth hearing. You know what I mean? Like, and I share it at, you know, they say like in these meetings, you're not supposed to like refer to any specific program, just in public forums such as this. So it's like without, and so I kind of talk in general terms like 12 step. You don't know which 12 step, but it's you know, that's kind of like where I kind of found my home. But anyway, yeah, I'll tell you, man, like it's crazy. So I through my 20s, you know, I kind of enjoyed drinking a little bit. Like drinking was kind of like my thing, right? Maybe to excess. Had some very dark times. It was just like, it was brutal, man. And like I got to the point where I was having like pretty like in my late 20s, man. Like I was having very late stage complications, like health complications, to the point like these are the things that happen to somebody like right before they die. Like I was having like seizures all the time, like literally like with the withdrawal seizures. Like I would literally like fall, crash my head open, and be carted away in an ambulance. You know what I mean? I was like having really bad health consequences, and like, man, I gotta figure something out. I tried to get clean. Let's see, 2009 was the first attempt, and then 2011 was the next attempt, and 2011, that's when I moved to Eugene from Portland, and I got like a good year of sobriety, and in that time, I kind of built up. Like I had a job, car, apartment, and at the same time, I was going to like these meetings and doing all that, and then I was like, "Look at me! Look what I did! Wow!" I took all the credit for it. I didn't give any credit to any of the people who helped me along the way. I didn't give any credit to like the mentors that helped me along the way. I didn't give credit to the fact that this program was probably something that was benefiting me in some way. And in taking all the credit for it, I kind of pulled back from all that. I said, look at me. I'm cured. I'm cured. I'm good. I don't need any of that stuff. Right. I didn't give any credit to the stuff that got me to that point in the first place. And that was like the biggest lesson that I ever learned was, you know, as soon as I took my power back and like, well, the power thing is kind of a controversial thing. And it keeps a lot of people away from like 12-step stuff because like, you know, the first step saying I'm powerless, right? And a lot of people aren't willing to go there. And I think there's a misconception around that particular piece of it. But in the kind of, there's so many different ironies and in recovery. And so like when I say I'm powerless over this, whatever, this drug, I immediately get all my power back because I can stop fighting it. I don't need to fight it anymore. I can just like be like, okay, I'm done. I need help. And so that's really what that's all about. But anyway, so then I ended up going back out in 2011 with a vengeance. I had lost a relative, and I used that as an excuse to just fully just go off the deep end. Yeah, it was crazy, man. And just on a fluke. On a fluke.
You do mourn, right? I mean, when you lose a loved one, you
Yeah.
do, and it's people look for ways to deal with that pain.
Yeah.
And you know, you went back to what you knew worked, right?
Yeah, man. Totally. And so I was drinking, but and it's so weird about like, you know, I literally think that the people are just wired differently, like physiologically, and I don't think that like it's kind of like we describe as like a pickle, right? Like a pickle was once a cucumber, but once it becomes a pickle, it can never revert back to being a cucumber, right? And so I had the experience of, after having done that to my body and just traumatized my body in my late 20s so much, once I had like a year of sobriety. Once I returned back to drinking again, my body went right back to that same state where I was like having withdrawal seizures again. It's just like, it didn't take it long at all to get immediately back to where I started. Like I was having the same physiological responses that my body had when I was full blown dependent to the extreme, you know, before, which is crazy.
So every time you're trying to get clean, you would have these withdrawal issues, like your health would just.
Well, no, it wasn't necessarily about getting, like I would drink the night before and I would wake up, and if I didn't immediately drink again, like my body would start to go into physical withdrawals, you know? And so that's but once you detox and get it out of your system, the acute withdrawals, then you're not really at risk of any like the seizures or the shakes or anything like that. That's kind of the acute phase, like while your body's, you know, it's dependent, you're dependent on it physically. and it's craving that. And so those are the physiological things that happen. It's super scary, man. It's the scariest shit ever.
It sounds crazy,
Yeah.
but it's kind of accepted in the drinking world
Yeah.
that if you're hungover, if you have a alcoholic beverage the next day, you actually feel better. And the reason you feel better is because you are going through some sense of withdrawals, and sometimes just kind of feeding those withdrawals helps you kind of deal with it a little bit. But I guess alcoholics never really have to deal with being hungover because you never stop drinking. So I guess
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that you get to that point where it's like the only way. And in fact, like I remember going to, man, yeah, at one point I remember going to this place that I had to wait in line or like you be on a waiting list to get it admitted to this detox place. And they said, just keep showing up every day, but in the meantime, do not stop drinking. Don't stop drinking. So this is like the clinic telling you don't stop drinking, because when you stop drinking, like alcohol and benzodiazepine are the two drugs that if you can actually physically die from the withdrawals. And you can actually, your body like shuts down, your heart will stop from alcohol withdrawals. And so it's actually super dangerous. So, quitting cold turkey on alcohol is really not advisable. Definitely go get some help if anybody's listening in that case, yeah, man. So I went back out, this was 2000, maybe like 2012 is when I went back out, because I got sober in 2011. And so I got about a year, went back out, and on a fluke, man, just on a fluke, I was at like some party or something, and somebody had some meth, and I was just like, okay, yeah, whatever, tried that. And then I was like, oh, so this is what I've been looking for my whole life. Oh, man. And literally, and I had it all justified in my head. I was like, because it's weird, because like I just immediately stopped the craving for alcohol. And I was like, wow, I just cured my alcoholism. And so that just started a whole path where the next 4 years, yep, I lost the job, lost the apartment, lost the house, living on the streets, basically shoplifting to support myself and the habit. And that became a whole nother thing in and of itself. Like I couldn't go into any stores around here. Like it was just bad, to the point where August 27th, 2016, I was up in Portland, and I had a whole bunch of outstanding warrants. I had all these I was on a suspended sentence. So basically, due to a shoplifting charge, and they said if you get in any more trouble, you're going to prison. And so I just completely blew all that off, and was just on the run. I was supposed to be checking in with a PO, all this stuff, and didn't. And August 27th, I got arrested for loitering up in Portland, and I went and served that sentence that had it hanging over my head. So I went to Oregon State Penitentiary for 3 months, and did the rest of my set in like minimum security yards. And ended up doing 14 months on a 22-month sentence in Oregon State Corrections. and this was I got out October 24th, 2017. And I did get high once in prison. But I feel like I was under duress, man. I was in Oregon State Penitentiary, like the big house. This is like where like they housed, death row. And I met some people that were there on life sentences, people that are never getting out, like killers, you know what I mean? And that's interesting, having conversation with people that they have unique life perspective, people that are not getting out. Like this one guy I was talking to, he said that he just got done serving his first life sentence, 26 years. And he was just starting on his second life. So he had consecutive life sentences, and he was just about to start his second life sentence. I'm just like, geez, man, like, wow. And but it was my first day at Oregon State Penitentiary, and like the cellmate, he had some drugs on him. He's like, hey, we get high in here. I'm like, okay, please just don't hurt me. I'll do it. I don't care. So in my mind, like I was against my will. And so I didn't count that really, but yeah, so I did get high once, but that's the last time I ever ingested any sort of mind or mood altering substance. And that was December 14th, 2016. So that was that. I got out and I'm like, you know what? I don't know anything. I'm super scared. I just don't. The only thing I know, like I got out and I like had like a box with some paperwork and the clothes on my back. I didn't know a soul, and my family had disowned me. They said, don't ever contact us ever again. Just don't. And I didn't have anybody or anything, man. And like, so I just went to a meeting. I said, look, I need help. I don't know anything. All I know is I don't want to get high. And they scooped me up, man. And then the persistence of going to those particular meetings, and some of the folks that I met who are still big parts of my life today, taught me how to live again, really, and gave me this life today that's beyond my wildest dreams. It's insane. So,
Dude, what a amazing story. I mean, to hit rock bottom like that and to
yeah,
be where you are now, and I mean, if if you didn't share that story, nobody would ever assume you've been through that.
yeah,
It's nuts. I mean, but it's so important because so many people have been there, and so many people need to hear other people's personal experiences and success stories to know that they can also get through it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had my issues with alcohol. I mean, I had some other issues growing up too, but
sure.
like the alcohol one, it's weird because I can, I don't drink a lot. I drink often, I always say, but
Yeah,
I did go through a stage in my 20s where I was drinking too much, and I never saw it as a problem because it was like I just wanted to I was just having a good time, and I just wanted everybody else to have a good time. So I just bought. I mean, I blew probably similar to yourself, blew a lot of money on drinking,
Mhm.
and some money that I wish I had now. But it's I would just blow all my money on going out, and I went through I had like a high school sweetheart that I dated for a while after high school, and then like once I turned 21, roughly, sometime around there, we broke up, and it's similar to like any breakup, really, a band breakup or a podcast breakup. You kind of feel like, what do I do in my life now? Like
Mhm.
this was like my identity. This is who I would spend all my free time with, and now I'm kind of on my own. And I had friends, I had people that like I knew from playing sports, or I would talk to at the gym, or I would talk to because they're in the music and they played in a band. But I didn't have friends like I went out and discuss my personal life with, or friends that I could just go have a drink with and connect. And so when and I was kind of a shy kid because it was kind of the single world, and that going out world was kind of new to me. And so drinking kind of helped bring out my social side, and it made it easier for me to talk to people. And then they just like, well, one drink makes things fun, well, two drinks makes things more fun, and then three drinks makes things more, and I mean, there was nights where literally like we always joked around about how like I would stop drinking from either when I ran out of money or the bar closed. Those were the only, because it was just like, oh, we'll do another shot, we'll do another, and not to
Mhm.
say that I didn't have some good times. It wasn't like all awful. It wasn't all like a bad. It was a really ridiculous experience because it's like, okay, well, I enjoyed myself, but I know I took it too far. And there's two occasions where I I don't know if it was I used to talk about this and say it was alcohol poisoning because that's what I was assuming, but it could have been withdrawals. I don't know, but there was two occasions where I drank. I was really going on some serious binging, and um, I drank so much that I locked myself in my room and stayed there for I think 3 days, and didn't move, like didn't leave, didn't go to the bathroom, didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't nothing. And the weirdest thing about that experience, and I remember the first time it happened. The first time it happened, I listened to. That's why like the song still gives me like goosebumps when I listen to it because it just brings me back to that place. I listened to Whom It May Concern by Under Oath on the album Define the Great Line. It's the last track, and it's already such a dark and emotional song. And I had that song playing on repeat for 3 days. And I mean, I had some crazy, like almost like psychedelic experiences while I was just like locked in my room and I couldn't move. And but I remember walking out and looking in the mirror and almost being afraid of like what I was going to see because I didn't remember what I looked like, like because I haven't
Wow.
looked in the mirror in so long. And I remember like being afraid to talk because I don't remember what I sounded like. Did you ever go through that? Like, did you ever go at such a long time where like you wouldn't, you just didn't look in the mirror and you almost like were afraid of what you were looking at? Like, I almost felt like I was afraid of what I become or something. It was something maybe deeper where I'm like, I'm gonna look in the mirror and I didn't know if I was gonna see like a alcoholic or if I was gonna see myself looking normal because I felt like an alcoholic. I felt like how could I drink so much that I just locked myself in my room for 3 days, and every little thing, like my mother would knock on the door because she thought I was like dead or something, and my heart rate would go up
Mhm.
every time I heard like would hear any noise, I would have like these crazy anxiety attacks where just like I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could do, the only thing I could think of was like just wait it out, wait till it goes away. And I think it took like 3 days. And so wild fucking experience. I mean, alcohol is like one of those things where just like because it's such a part of so many cultures and it's around every corner, we don't think about we don't look at addiction to alcohol the same way we look at addiction to other drugs, but it's similar, if not worse. You know, it's made a lot of great memories, and it's also made a lot of tragic memories, and you know, it's capable of both, and it's weird because I wanted your opinion on this because obviously all of your life experiences that you've been through. Have you heard about the Rat Park experiment? I'm sure you probably have heard me talk about it.
Is this the like the utopian one?
It's
Like,
you know the where they basically had rats or mice, I don't know which ones, but they had them in a cage, and they had two things of water. One of them had cocaine or heroin.
yeah.
Something, and then they
Yeah,
kept
and they get all high on the cocaine, and then they put them in like a rat utopia, and they like don't even care about the cocaine. Is that it? Yeah.
and then they didn't come to the cocaine, right?
Yeah.
And what the conclusion they kind of came to was that it wasn't that the substance was addictive, it was that they were unhappy in the cage,
Oh,
and
totally.
the substance gave them something that brought them some type of happiness. And you look at like I don't know if you've ever had Johan Hari on your show, but he had the book. I had him on when he was promoting the book. Oh, what the hell was it called? Disconnected or something along those lines. But it was about like, you know, basically the true causes of depression and anxiety and those type of things. And then Dr. Carl Hart, he's another one who kind of looks at addiction in this light, where they think it's more internal than external. And it kind of makes sense because so this guy who puts together pickup basketball, one of the places I play at, this guy Devron, he's older, and he used to be, you know, just he'll say it himself, he was a shithead. He drank a lot, cheated a lot, lied a lot, and now he helps people in classes and with recovery and whatnot. And we've talked about this specific topic, and he completely disagreed with me. He thought that it was the substance. It was much more the substance than the person themselves. And but I'm curious on your perspective. Because this is, and again, I want your take on this, because this is from like the outside looking in. I didn't. Yeah. My experiences were very mild compared to your experiences, but I kind of look at it as like, okay, if cocaine or alcohol or whatever substance you're describing or talking about if you could quantify its addictive properties, and it's like, okay, this is more addictive than that, and that's more addictive. You know, we always describe things in that way. We talk about things like, oh, sugar is more addictive than this. So it's like we're kind of describing things as like, okay, what makes you addicted to it is the substance, and it kind of takes away from like maybe looking deeper to see what the issue is. And I'm like, well, if cocaine's or alcohol is addictive, and has these addictive properties that you can quantify, then why would somebody like myself be able to have a glass of wine every night with dinner and I'm fine, and then somebody else who maybe used to drink a lot would have that same glass and be right back to where they were, ruining their lives, drinking too much?
Oh, yeah.
So, and it's like, okay, so is it the fact that the alcohol is addictive, or is it the fact that I found peace, or I found a fulfillment, or I'm in a good mental place physically and mentally, where I can have a little bit, I don't want to say self-control, maybe self-control is the wrong word, but discipline maybe, to deal with that? Like, what's your opinion on, sorry, I probably gave you too much.
No, that's great. No, I mean, I can go off on all that stuff. I mean, I feel like that's definitely a combination of both. I mean, these substances do have physically addictive properties. You know, you can look at that in terms of like the tolerance, like you need more to achieve the same effect. You know, it does. So there's the physical aspect for sure, but you know, the mental and the emotional piece is very much enmeshed with it as well. You know what I mean? Particularly, you know, like we call it, it's got like a physical, mental, and spiritual component to it. And this is like, you know, my recovery talking. So, you know, as a clinician, as a counselor, there's a very defined clinical approach to this, to the whole idea of addiction. And then there's like the more, 12-step or just other, recovery based approaches as well. And they're two different approaches. And sometimes they're not really, they don't mix well. Like a lot of times, like certain agencies will tell you, hey, you can't teach 12-step in our agency. I'm like, what the fuck? That's crazy. You know what I mean? And some are very much, they encourage 12-step, or they're a 12-step based agency. So there's like kind of, and a lot of it has to do with like the higher power thing. Like they don't, some agencies don't want you to use the whole higher power thing. And I can talk about that too, but kind of the way I look at it, having lived it and having, worked with a lot of other folks.
No, I was
But
just gonna,
yeah.
you're for people listening who don't know what the higher power thing,
Yeah,
that's the controversy with like the religious aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So do you have a problem with that?
Well, so basically, it all kind of started with Alcoholics Anonymous was the first 12-step program. And in the literature, they used the capital G God word a lot, right? And they refer to that as the higher power. Now, they do go on to say that the higher power can be whatever you want it to be. You can literally make the higher power just whatever, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's up to you to define what that is. But the 1930s language used in the original Alcoholics Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, is very, I would say, Christian aligned, kind of, you know what I mean? And so people are turned off by that. And I completely understand that. So kind of more modern 12-step programs, ones that are born out of that, their literature is a lot more modernized and a lot more inclusive to just very much drive home the point that, hey, this is not a Christian thing. You guys, come on, please, 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 please. And the way I describe it, it's like, okay, so when you were in your addiction, when you were, whatever it is, heroin, meth, alcohol, whatever it was, this thing was a power greater than you. This was a power greater than you. This was something that you woke up every day, and every single thought and action that you did was in service of that power that was greater than you, right? So now all of a sudden you're clean. And a lot of times people don't, like, when they get clean, the decision's been made for them. Either they're in the back of a cop car, or child welfare shows up in their life, and it's not, getting clean was not on the agenda yesterday, and now all of a sudden I've got the government in my life and I have to get clean. So all of a sudden, that thing that has been your higher power for however long, maybe your whole life, maybe you don't know anything different. Maybe you don't even realize there's a problem just because that's your family. Like, I have so many people that it's like, lived out in rural communities where it's like the whole family, cooks meth and all this stuff. And it's like, they don't even think that there's anything wrong with that sort of thing, And so just like removing that from your life all of a sudden, just like that, it's like, well, now what? So now you've just removed this thing that has been your higher power your whole life or however long. And what do? We need, and now it's like a vacuum. And so what I talk about is like, we're not looking for you to like get baptized and like go to church or anything like that. All we're looking for is a power bigger than your addiction. That's it. We talk about a higher power, a power greater than yourself, for one, but really we're just looking for something bigger than your addiction. We're looking for something that you can gain strength from, that's bigger than this thing that has ruled your life that you're trying to get away from. And that's really the simplest way to put it. And it could be anything. And one of the things that I feel anybody that's struggling with that is like, just if you go to a support group or some meeting of people who are there in support of each other and collectively trying to help each other, that collectively is a power greater than any one of the individual people at that particular meeting. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of strength and love and support that you can do and that you can get from that. And one of my favorite parts in one of these books talks about how like you can draw strength from this power long before you understand it. You don't have to understand any of it. You just have to open your mind to the fact that, hey, maybe there's something bigger than me that can help me. And a lot of that comes in the form of other people showing up in your life who've been where you're at, who know exactly what you're struggling with. Like, I go to meetings and I see somebody walks in with like a garbage bag, with all their belongings in it, and they just look rough. And I'm like, dude, I know exactly what that feels like. And you can go up to them after the meeting and just be like, hey, bro, like, blah, 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 glad you're here. Just saying that, just that simple thing of saying that to that person. Like, and then you go off and you go about your day. And sometimes those interactions have such a huge, profound impact on those individuals. You don't know. And I've seen it. I've been that person. And I remember people who came up to me in the beginning when I showed up and I just, humbled myself and got vulnerable and said, I need help. I don't know. And those folks that came up to me, man, that's life-changing stuff. So yeah, but so it's crazy. It's powerful stuff. And that's where, to me, that's what recovery is like, I get to the place where now that we have a saying, you can only keep what you have by giving it away. So that's really what keeps me clean, is the opportunity to give it back to others. I sponsor guys. I've got a couple guys that I sponsor, you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's how this thing works, is then eventually one of them just started sponsoring a guy, and I'm just like, yes, that's how this thing works, But in terms of like whether, where it comes from, we have from the 12-step perspective. This is not the clinical perspective, because even to this day, there's so much debate from a clinical perspective about, there's all these different like psychological modalities as to what addiction is. Like, they still haven't figured it out. And so that's why I kind of like revert back to, I like the 12-step approach, honestly, because like they say it's like a threefold thing. It's a physical, mental, and spiritual affliction, right? So the physical is the compulsion, just like this overriding desire to continue to do this self-destructive behavior, even when you have all the evidence in your life against you. Like, your life is crumbling around you, but you still can't do it. It's this compulsive behavior. And the mental part is the obsession. So obsessive compulsive, very much like you're obsessed with it. Every thought you have revolves around that. Like, it's inescapable. And those two go hand in hand. And then they say that the spiritual piece is the complete self-centeredness. Complete self-centeredness. Because when you're at that state where you are ruining your family, like you're ruining like everything around you, like that is just complete self-centeredness. Like addiction is very self-centered. And so when we're looking at solutions then to all those, we talk about the higher power, and we have a spiritual affliction, so we want a spiritual solution, and that's where some of that comes in. And so the opposite of self-centeredness is then, being others-centered and giving away and being, thinking about other people. And that's kind of what recovery is all about. Like people have this thing, like you see it in movies. You go to a meeting, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic. That's just like such a teeny tiny piece of it. Because really what it is just a culture of trying to do the next right thing and helping the still suffering addict or alcoholic. That's what it's all about. So,
Well, the religious aspect is interesting. I remember at my gym, there was this super nice kid. He was this born again Christian who used to be a alcoholic and went through recovery and has his life together, and now he has a great job and he had everything together. I remember we used to get in this debate about how he thanks God for his recovery. And I would always be like, listen, I'm happy that you feel that some supernatural entity gave you some type of just motivation or inspiration or some internal power to overcome that addiction. But I'm like, in a way, doesn't it take away from what you've accomplished? Because I'm like, you're giving all the credit to this other supernatural being, and really you're the one who had to physically deal with the withdrawals. You're the one who had to emotionally deal with the fact that maybe you were the blame for everything that was kind of falling apart in your life and your addiction, and maybe you should take responsibility for some of that. And then I remember we would go back and forth, and then eventually I got to the point where I like started reanalyzing like my stance on it, and I'm like, listen, like, if it helped him and if he got through it, does it really fucking matter where that help came from? If it was supernatural, not supernatural, if he believes it, if he doesn't believe it, if it actually was something that, some higher power that helped him or didn't, like, those details aren't as important as the fact that he got through it and he found a way through it. And so that's always been a very fascinating aspect of it. I mean, it just so many people out there are at crossroads in lives, in their lives, where they're just unhappy and they're unfulfilled. They spend all their time and energy and the best years of their lives invested in some corporate job where they have bosses and higher ups yelling at them and screaming at them, not appreciating them. And then they come home and they can't even be a good boyfriend or husband or brother or father or friend because they're emotionally and mentally exhausted and treated like shit all day. And then and then people have a drink because to deal with it, and people have and that's why, like, alcohol to me, because I grew up being Portuguese, like alcohol is a huge part of our culture. You go to Portugal, literally like all we do is talk about food and alcohol, and all we do is eat and drink. And it's a way of creating a community and friendships and connecting with people, because through food and alcohol, like and that's the thing, like I don't think it's specifically because of alcohol. I think Portuguese people and a lot of Western cultures love social gatherings, and if that's going to church, if that's making wine or making chorizo sausage, all these things have a lot of similarities. And what the similarities are is that it's an excuse to get your friends together. It's an excuse to get your family together. It's an excuse to hang out and get a big gathering and then enjoy each other's company. And it creates a community. And so I think community is so important. I'm sure you're familiar with what's his name, Sebastian Junger, who wrote the book Tribe, and it's fascinating. So he was, and I'll try to get. I've told this story on my podcast before, so I'll try to make it quick. So for the listeners who have to go through the torture of hearing it again, but Sebastian Junger was, I think he was doing documentaries for Discovery Channel or Net Geo or something. He's an author. He does a bunch of documentaries, but he was at the most dangerous part in Afghanistan with these guys in the military. I don't know if they're Marines or what they were. They might have been Marines, but either way, he was with these military guys in the most dangerous part of Afghanistan. I think he was interviewing them or recording film for a upcoming documentary, and they would talk about how they missed their families. They couldn't wait to get home. And, it was so dangerous where they were, all this stuff. It seemed like everything that he was hearing would lead to eventually these guys getting home and being super happy that they're home. Well, he ended up reconnecting with them, like, I don't know if it was months later or a year later or whenever, but he reconnected with them, and just about all of them were depressed and all of them were unhappy. And he talks to them and tries to figure out what the fuck's going on here. Like, you guys were just in the most dangerous part of Afghanistan, couldn't wait to get home. Now you're home and you seem unhappy. And after talking to them, he realized, like, oh shit, like they're not unhappy because they're home. They're unhappy because they're unfulfilled, and there's no appreciation in their lives anymore. They went from being a part of a brotherhood that each other's survival depended on each other, and now they're home working a unfulfilling job, unappreciated, with no brotherhood, no close friends or whatever, and it was many of them actually missed being in Afghanistan.
Well, it's like, man, it's like now that the COVID narrative's crumbling, it's like I'm kind of like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like, just go back to talking about how we need to stop the wars? Like, man, now what am I going to do now? No, I'm just kidding.
It's funny. I was thinking about that. I'm like, how many doctors were being pulled in every direction, for interviews, and how many of them, like, their schedules just are opening up more and more every week. But I was thinking also, I'm like, I hope people don't stop booking some of these doctors and talking about this, because this issue won't. I mean, before COVID, I had Brian Festa on from the CT Freedom. I had Del Bigtree on. I had so many people on prior, because this was a issue prior to COVID in regards to, like, pushing more vaccines onto people, suppressing anybody who had adverse reactions, any of those stories, not giving you the full information and all that stuff. So hopefully it doesn't go away. It is one of those things where it's nice to now talk about other things also, because it is one of those things where I'm like, how many more fucking shows am I going to do about this one specific topic? I can't. I'm sure listeners would probably like to hear something different, but there's something new to talk about every other day. If I don't constantly talk about it, I'm going to feel like, we're going to be behind the ball. There's going to be some important news or some important outlook on what's going on that's going to be forgotten or missed. So it's it's all super fascinating. But I mean,
I hope people don't stop talking about it. I mean, I really hope they don't. You know what I mean? One of the big takeaways I had from the conversation I just had with Richard Gage was that, he's been in the business of trying to hold the government accountable for a long time. He's been fighting this incredibly, like the way he characterized it. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill, and the boulder's so big, you have no idea where the top of the hill is, but you just keep pushing. Right. And You
I
know,
like that.
so I feel like right now, though, for his movement, for the 9/11 Truth movement, like the stage is set in this amazing way where people are just dying for some government accountability. Like people are just hungry to hold some of these people accountable for their transgressions, right? And so maybe it's time for the 9/11 Truth movement to get some victories in that sense. And maybe COVID 20 years from now, maybe we'll start to get some answers. I don't know. But that's one of the things I asked him was just like, we've got all these other, we've got these new people that are whatever you want to call them, organizations popping up that are trying to hold the government accountable. And you've been doing this for a long time. Like, what advice do you have for them? And he's just like, just be persistent, be consistent, and that's something that maybe we can take away from it too. It's like, okay, so yes, they just pulled off the crime of the century and now they're in stage 10 of the genocide, which is the denial and cover up. Right. And so now we can, as people in the media, as things emerge and we get new information, we can continue to drive the message home and still advocate for some sort of accountability. Right. And that's one of the things I said to Richard too. I'm like, hey, you know what? Like the longer they delay it, the more information we're going to get, the more evidence we're going to get. So that's kind of, they're shooting themselves in the foot by delaying it, because the longer it goes, we're just going to have more ammo when we finally do get our day in court type of thing,
And I hope that is the case. I hope eventually somebody is responsible for the kids who had to wear masks in school. The kids that their linguistic skills are behind, or their social skills are behind, or they're fucking petrified of the world because their mom and dad were screaming at them every time the mask was underneath their nose. I mean, all the people who lost their small businesses, people who went back to alcoholism, the fact that they couldn't go to AA. I mean, you know how important that is. I mean, you shut down the churches, you shut down AA, you shut down, all these communities that help people get through their lives and their struggles, and people who didn't have funerals the way they should have had them. I had a cousin who passed away in early 2021, I think, or was it late 2020, somewhere along those lines. And we had to do the typical, everybody had to be apart from each other, wearing masks type things, limited people who could go and all that stuff. So it's like, some of those family members never get closure, never got, what they deserved. And that's some, a service the way that they would like to do it, with the family and friends there to help them through it. And so it's like, there's a lot of other tragedies that people kind of overlooked. And so, I mean, in regards to kind of, not to bring it back completely, because I don't know how much longer you want to talk about your own personal.
No, I'm down. It's kind of funny though. Like I'm actually on a long lunch right here, so I probably should cut in about 15 minutes, but I'm good for about another 15. And I gotta go back to work.
I got some stuff I gotta do too, so that's okay. But how much two questions real quick.
Mm-hmm.
One, were you in a place in life where you didn't feel fulfilled, and was some type of substance like alcohol or meth or whatever kind of helping you deal with just a lack of happiness you had in your life? And then two, when you got everything back together, and obviously you're doing great for yourself, and you got your life together, and you're recovered and all that stuff, did you end up fixing things with any friends and family that you might have burned bridges with? Did they end up hopefully understanding what you went through, and kind of rebuilding some of those bridges?
So for the first part of the question, absolutely, completely unfulfilled, completely just, I had a great childhood. I can't attribute any of this to, the upbringing. Like I have two very loving parents, they're still together, great people. I just kind of just messed myself up, you know what I mean? And just like, there was some trauma in my 20s and just like all kinds of nonsense that I was, when you talked about too, it's this thing about the whole idea of liquid courage, right? You drink to kind of like bring yourself out and have more confidence in social situations. And I think what it is like in our society, and just looking back on, what school is like for people. Like, I feel like there's these walls that are constructed around us that pound into our head that we are, we need to be self-conscious and the world's judging us. And all these walls are put up kind of artificially. These artificial walls are all around us, and it's the things that we put up to like guard the things that we feel that are maybe unworthy within us, like the things that we feel like if the world knew, then they would hate me or judge me and all these things. And so we build these kind of like artificial walls around us, and keeps us trapped in a place of feeling unworthy, and keeping ourselves like we can't just go out and be social or be ourselves, or we don't feel like we can be ourselves. And so then we rely on substances. I think that's a very common thing. And I think that's what started with me. I started in high school, like not fitting in. I was like pretty overweight, just like, so that was my way of kind of coping and being a part of, you know what I mean, and breaking through. And then the ironic thing about it all is that after having been through all that and having relied on substances for so long to kind of like feel whole, and then looking at them as the solution to my problem. And then once that becomes the problem, once your solution becomes your problem, then you're totally fucked at that point, And so that's kind of like where you reach that critical mass of like, now your life is going to be, now you're pretty much destroying yourself, and you're on a path towards death if you're lucky, and you're going to be very miserable on the way out. But the funny thing is that, having gotten clean, and a big part of recovery is it has very little to do with the drugs or alcohol themselves. It's learning how to live again. It's learning these principles that, maybe we were never taught or don't realize the importance of, and like in the 12 steps, they only mention drugs or alcohol in the first step. The rest of it's about healing. The rest of it's about growing. And so now where I'm at today, and like having gone through that process and gone through the healing and walked through all those uncomfortable things and processed everything and made an inventory and looked at my character defects and came up with and developed this like toolkit of like coping mechanisms for life, and like looking at life in a whole different way. Now I'm broken through to the point where like now I'm what I wanted to be. You know what I mean? Like I have the confidence. I'm able to like speak publicly, and I'm able to like do these things that like there's never in a million years with all the drugs and alcohol in the world, I'd never be able to do this stuff. You know what I mean? That's the big illusion. I think the big illusion is that those help propel you to these next stages, when in fact, you don't need any of that. You just kind of need to, like, for me, at least that was my experience. I had to just take a look at myself and realize my worth in the world. And once I was able to find that, not just understand it, but internalize it and then incorporate that, that's kind of where I'm at today. And I just have so much gratitude. I know that it's from these people that taught me this stuff, and from the things I picked up along the way. And so, but during that process, part of that process is looking very, very hard look at yourself. They call it the searching and fearless moral inventory, looking at all the things, all your transgressions, all your deepest, darkest secrets, and kind of like having like, for lack of better words, like a death and resurrection ritual where you like purge all that with somebody, and you share with somebody all your deepest, darkest secrets. And then they kind of like reciprocate with you, and they're like, oh yeah, I did that too. You're like, what, really? So I'm not like this horrible, awful person. Nah, man, you're just fucking whatever, And so, and then you come out of that and you're like, oh, wow. Okay. I guess maybe all right. Yeah. Okay. And then like you kind of build on that, and you look at your character defects, and then you go and you try and make amends with the people that you hurt. So yes, I did have the opportunity to make amends with certain folks. And kind of the criteria with that is that you're not supposed to go and make amends with folks who, if by doing so, would cause more harm. You know what I mean? So there's certain criteria. So you don't necessarily go make amends to everybody, but the whole point of the exercise is that you become willing to make the amend. Like I put their name on the paper, and I basically become willing to make that amend. And sometimes that amend appears in your life, and you just make the amend on the spot, but you wouldn't have been able to do that, because I actually had that experience. Like, it's people like, oh yeah, I'm not going to make that amend because it would cause more harm than good. And then that person comes back in your life, and you've done the work, and you've become willing, and you can make that amend from a genuine place, and the situation kind of takes care of itself. But I do have family members who I did make amends with. But it's funny. My parents said, like, just don't ever contact us ever again. And to this day, I still have not had any contact with them. I just kind of honored that boundary, and it's just never come up. So it's kind of crazy, man. It's crazy.
Have you thought about contacting them? Yeah.
So the kind of deal is like, I'm in touch with my sister, and she's one of the ones I made amends with. And then we kind of check in every 6 months or so. And, she's kind of indicated that they're still not really in a position to want to have a relationship at this point. So I'm just like, all right, fine.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like regardless, whatever my kids go through in life, I don't know if I could ever.
Yeah. I mean, I was, I never like stole from them or anything, but they were front row seats to the chaos for 15 years, man. Like just they tried to, you know, they allowed me to live with them for a while while I was at my worst, and they just like saw the most horrific, like self-destructive shit ever, and they had to endure it, and they tried to do it in a loving way to the point where they couldn't for their own self-preservation. They just had to set this boundary and said, dude, you're lost, man. Like just don't ever. And I kept, and there was multiple times over the years I'd build it up, you know, I'd get clean and everything's great, and then I'd just crash and burn again. And they went on that roller coaster with me for so long that, you know, I have no, you know, I don't blame them, honestly, you know.
So you think that they're just concerned about going on that roller coaster again?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's like a self-preservation thing, you know what I mean? And then the last contact I ever had with them was, oh man, it's just crazy. Like so this was like after I'd been on my 4-year binge where I was homeless. I didn't contact them once, not for 4 years, you know what I mean? And like finally I got arrested and I was on my way to prison, and I called them from the county jail, and they were like, what the heck? And nobody answered. And then I got a letter a couple days later, and it was from them, and they said, hey, we saw this phone call from a county jail. And we were like, what the heck? And then we figured out what was going on, and that was the point where we realized like we just can't, for our own, like the most loving thing we can do is just like, we cannot have any more contact with you. So please honor that. And just, we're severing our relationship with you, and please don't contact us ever again. It's basically what they said. And so, yeah, sitting in a freaking jail cell, going to prison, getting that letter, you're just like that's a bottom. That's a wake up call right there.
Dude, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how sometimes the worst prison is the one that we create.
Oh, you know? Totally.
It's nuts, man. Wow.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's the thing is I became willing. I made that and so in those situations, right, what we do is we call it living amends. You know, for example, like if there's like a family member who passed away or something, and you did them dirty and you owe them an amend, but there's obviously no way you can ever make that amends. So what we do is we just call it living amends, where you live your life in such a way that would make them proud, and that you just carry on and you don't do that again. You know, part of the amends is I make it to myself. I make amends with myself. Like I'm sorry for how I treated myself for so long. Right. And it's kind of like you make an apology to somebody and then you go back and do the same thing. That's kind of a dirtbag thing to do. So I kind of think of like with myself, like I've made amends with myself for the way I treat myself for so long, but now that means I can't go back and treat myself that same way ever again. Right. And so that's part of those living amends, is living in such a way that would not only make them proud, but now putting more positive in the world that I'm taking out, or trying to at least atone and just, you know, make the world a better place than when I found it. And that's something I hold on to very dearly. You know what I mean? A lot of that has to do with helping others in recovery and helping others find their path, and whether professionally or just, you know, going to meetings and that sort of thing.
Well, as important as community is, and, you know, I think that's a huge part of us finding purpose in life and having people there to help you when you go through shit. I also think it's really, really important to find peace first among yourself. Like, be happy without being dependent on other people. You know, like I used to tell girls, you know, I used to date back in the day, or even buddies who were going through it, where they would be super heartbroken after a breakup. And I'm like, I went through that. I went through you know, I was suicidal after that first heartbreak. I hit rock bottom. And then I'm like, I'll never depend on somebody else for my happiness. I'm like, I will learn to be happy on my own. And then this person that I'm dating or marrying or hanging out with will add happiness to my already happy state. I won't depend on them for my happiness, because people are flawed and people will let you down. So if you depend on other people, not to say that, you know, my wife will let me down or whatever, but I'm just saying that, like, the potential is always there. So if I depend all my happiness on her or whoever, then the potential of being let down will always be there. Where if I find happiness alone, you know, internally, find peace, find fulfillment on my own, then everybody else will just add to that, you know. So I think that's really important too. People too often depend on other people for their happiness. You know, they you know, you need to find, not to sound all spiritual, but like, I think that's why the whole spiritual thing resonates with people, because people realize like how important it is to find peace with your actions, peace with your life, peace with who you are, feeling I always talk about too, like one thing that's, and I'll make this quick because I know you got to go soon, but how everything's perspective, right? Like when I go to Florida, we always stay with my wife's family, and they live in Boca. Boca is a place where there's, they're not rich, but they live near a lot of rich people. So you sometimes my wife would be like, "Oh, let's drive through this really beautiful neighborhood," and it's just like you're driving through this neighborhood and you're just looking at some of these houses and cars, and you're just like you feel like the most unaccomplished person in the world. And then so you have that perspective. And then when I work construction, sometimes we work in Holyoke or Springfield, which have some really, really bad areas. Like Springfield and Holyoke have been named some of the most dangerous spots in the U.S. And sometimes we're doing projects in some, like, literally some of the worst neighborhoods. And when you work there and you see people who don't have anything, and you see people who are addicts on the street, like legit, you'll see homeless people everywhere, you see addicts everywhere, you see you go back to your house and you go and you're like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I live in like a somewhat safe community, and I have a car, and I have clothes, and I have food, like all these things that you take for granted. And so it's like, what changed? Like what I have hasn't changed. It's my outlook on what I have. If I'm around people who have more shit, then I feel like, I don't feel grateful. I feel like, I start feeling bad for myself. But if I'm around people who have less shit, I start putting things in perspective and feeling grateful for what I do have. And I think we spend way too much time discussing and wanting things that we don't have, and not enough time appreciating whatever you do have. Because like that quote, your worst day is somebody else's best day. And
Totally.
it's true. It's like things can always be worse, and we can always have something to be grateful for. And when you see these videos of people in like really poor places, even Portugal, like where I was born, I even though I wasn't raised there, I came here when I was young, but my parents were raised in a house with no running water, no bathroom, no whatever. They weren't unhappy at all. They were super happy. And I mean, they had community. My dad's one of 12. My mom's one of 7. Huge fucking families, uncles and aunts and cousins everywhere. Like literally you felt like the whole village, everybody was related in one way or another. And they had food that they grew. They had alcohol that they made together. They had the woods and the outdoors to play and to have fun. And they didn't, they didn't feel like they were missing out on something, because everybody else around them had the same shit. So I think Dr. Christopher Ryan talked about this, how like depression and anxiety are its greatest when the poorest and the richest, that gap is the greatest. If you're surrounded by people who have similar things, you don't feel like you're deprived. You don't feel you feel grateful, because everybody is kind of similar. So when that wealth gap is greater, you start being envious of these lifestyles. And then same thing with like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, like all these freaking social media platforms. You look at somebody, they only post pictures of good times. They only post
the highlights of their life.
Yeah, the highlights. Exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
Well, in recovery, we have a word for that. We say that, and this may be not exclusively to recovery, but we say it's comparing your insides to other people's outsides, right?
Oh, I like that.
So it's like, I know how I feel on the inside. And so people always project, the most perfect version of themselves that they can, right? But you don't know what they're struggling with. You don't know what's going on. And I bet you anything, those people in those big houses down in Florida, like they're miserable. Odds are. Bet you. I don't know. Yeah. But
yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, well, I know you got to go, but thanks so much, Scott, for sharing.
Ricky, thank you, man. This is honor. Always an honor, man. Always an honor to catch up with you. Like you've been like, not only were you such a huge inspiration for me, even trying to have the courage to do this, but then you've been like such an instrumental piece of, encouraging me, and like very early on, like helping me with some of the technical stuff, and like just getting obviously plugged in with the Union of the Unwanted, man. Like that was a game changer. And so just like you've been a huge part of this journey for me. So I just have the utmost gratitude and appreciation for you.
No problem. Listen, like I've been saying a lot lately, when one of us does better, we all do better.
Yeah.
Everybody
100%.
rises together. And, there's been plenty of times you've helped out, which again, it's a perfect example of how things come around, like you'd refer somebody, I'm like, oh yeah, I can connect you with them. And then there's been times where I'm like, wait, hasn't Scott had him on the show? Let me, and
Yeah.
you return the favor, and that's kind of the way the world works. It's
Yep.
you never know when it's a nice gesture will come around to help you out in the
Totally.
long run. So thank you so much, Scott. I'm so glad that you're doing well. I'm so glad that you didn't give up on podcasting.
No.
And you got
We're just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell listeners where they can find you, man. So for my people, because this is SwapCast, right? Where a SwapCast is. Yeah.
We'll share these. The RippleEffectPodcast.com is the easiest place to see all the places you can find the video version of the podcast. The audio version of the podcast is available everywhere, all the common places.
But RickyVarandas2.com, RickyVarandas.com too, right?
So the two I bought both URLs. I actually bought all of them. I bought RickyVarandas.com, the RippleEffectPodcast.com.
Okay. Because I typed in the RippleEffectPodcast.com and it took me to RickyVarandas.com. I was like, oh, okay, well maybe it all works. It all works.
It all brings you to the same place. So yeah, and so you can go there and you can basically find the merch and you can find anything you want to find and all that stuff. So and then all the social media platforms I'm on if you want to connect with me on there too. So yeah, and tell listeners where they can get your connect with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just rebunked.news, rebunked.news, all the links to all the video platforms, we're on all the podcast players, and then probably Telegram's probably my favorite spot to send people for social media, t.me/rebunkedpod. And then we got a subscribe star too. Just try to do some premium content there. So Right on. Well, Ricky, brother, thank you so much, man.
Hey, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend and good luck with everything. And I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future.
Totally. Talk soon.
Absolutely.
Peace.
See ya.